All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Rob from Trey Education. Really excited to be here with Sohan and Evan. We're going to talk a little bit about what's going on at the intersection of AI and education right now. Before we get into the questions, I wanted to give you guys a chance to introduce yourselves. So, Sohan, you want to dive in first?
For sure. Yeah, thanks for having us, Rob. Hey everyone, my name's Sohan, one of the co-founders of Flint, and Flint is an AI platform built specifically for schools.
And Evan.
Okay, my introduction is going to be the same length, I guess. Wow, Sohan. Let me see if I can get it down to a sentence. My name's Evan Harris, former independent school teacher and administrator, and I currently consult with independent schools, helping them navigate the intersection of AI and education with a special focus on risk management, particularly as it pertains to deep fake risks and deep fake sexual abuse.
Nice. Again, really appreciate you guys taking the time. Considering how deeply engaged you are in this space, one thing that I'm curious about to start with is what have you been learning about AI recently, and how has that been shaping or shifting your view about the role of AI in education? Anybody wants to dive in? Go for it.
Yeah, Sohan, go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. Happy to go first. So, one thing I've been surprised to see in the last year to maybe year and a half is that reinforcement learning for AI is starting to work. And what that means is AI can now be trained off of example data sets where there's like a success and a failure. And what that means is that AI very rapidly now is getting good at technical tasks like coding and solving math problems. Because in a lot of those domains, you have a lot of examples of like, here's code that's buggy versus here's really good code.
Mm.
So what I think that's going to mean for schools specifically is that AI will get really, really good at STEM, which is going to unlock some cool use cases, like the whole hallucinating at math will very quickly go away, in my opinion, in the next year or so. But there's going to be other areas that surprisingly have developed very quickly early on, but I think will now slow down in comparison. So, for example, obviously everyone knows how students are using AI to write papers. Turns out it's really hard to give AI concrete examples of good and bad writing to rapidly improve its writing capabilities, unlike with code or math, where you can very easily do it programmatically. So, yeah, I think we're going to see an explosion of like AI use cases in STEM specifically for schools.
Hmm.
Nice. Thanks. How about you, Evan?
Yeah, and it's funny Sohan raises that because I just made the switch over to buying an account, like a professional pro account, whatever it is, for Claude, precisely because it's so much better for vibe coding, which is we can talk about later. But I feel like that ability to sort of create your own apps to solve your own problems, particularly for the sort of operations, like the staff and operations side of the school, is like a really interesting space that I expect to get a lot better for exactly the reason that Sohan said, like it either runs or it doesn't. Now, whether it runs because it's taking some really weird steps to make it run that are like super inefficient and would make like a real coder cry is like another question. But yeah, like what I've been focused on lately has been doing a lot of reading on synthetic media and deep fakes, learning a lot about sort of like what are the cognitive defenses people have to have kind of good digital discernment because I think that schools are relatively, or maybe in some places completely unprepared for sort of the media environment they're heading into, where you not only have deepfake sexual abuse, but potentially like synthetic media coming into the admissions process, or you have a new form of bullying where you have like much more complicated disciplinary process because you're not sure whether what you're seeing in terms of evidence, either exonerating someone or seeming to incriminate someone, is real. You also have new vectors of attack for AI scams, for financial scams, where they're trying to take your data, they're trying to take your money. You think you're getting a call from the head of school, but it's a vocal clone. Like schools don't have the kind of training they need to exist in that threat environment. And I think giving them good policies, good governance, good crisis management and communications, and good preventative education is going to become increasingly important because the sort of pace at which new threats emerge is going to accelerate.
Hmm. I
Yeah,
mean,
I think that's a really great point. I, for a while, was like a bit kind of almost arrogant about like my own literacy. I was like, oh, like I'm not going to get tricked by deepfake because I know what to look out for. And then a few weeks ago, I saw this video on Twitter that was like going around, might have been like a month ago now, of it's completely absurd. I'm going to say that I fell for this and I'm going to look kind of dumb saying this, but it was a video of a kangaroo holding a boarding pass. and a woman
Oh,
in front of the kangaroo arguing with the flight attendant, being like, "Oh, this is my emotional support kangaroo. Why can't I bring it on the flight?" So like, it's such a crazy, situation. But the video is going around, and people are like, "Oh my God, look how crazy this situation is!" Right? I can't believe she tried to bring a kangaroo on a flight. I saw the video like 10 times that day. It just kept popping in my feed. I was like, "Oh wow, that's crazy!" Like, I just totally fell for it. A week later, it turns out it's just entirely just like an AI generated video. So yeah, I got totally got, and now I am like updating my priors about like how good the stuff is getting, and like just how careful I also have to be about like what content I'm like watching.
Yeah.
yeah.
And
I
then,
mean, when you
sorry,
guys
go ahead.
talk about how good things are getting, it feels like from the school perspective, that means that you've got opportunities and threats, and it feels like a school really can't treat AI as sort of a fringe issue. It feels like between those opportunities and threats, this has got to be a significant focus for schools that are really paying attention. Is that accurate? Am I hearing you guys right there?
Yeah, I think so. It's tricky though because if you're an independent school CFO right now, the kind of like risks that are most top of mind for you are probably focused on admissions and giving, right? Because the economic landscape is so uncertain.
Mhm.
And so getting this front and center for them is really tricky. Whereas I think, interestingly, if you maybe go the dean of students route and talk about things in terms of like student safety, or sort of an academic dean talking about opportunities with authentic assessment and rethinking pedagogy, you might get like a little more traction as those rules have become increasingly professionalized with more and more responsibility. Whereas just purely thinking of it in terms of risk management puts you in a landscape with 50 other risks that they're managing, and it can be very tempting for them to just consider it like too niche to really give time and resources to.
Yeah. All right. On the topic of opportunities, we'll try to start with more of the glass half full, and then we'll get into more about the threats. But I'm curious what both of you would say are the most overlooked opportunities for AI to be helping schools right now.
Yeah, my view there is like it's really important to take a use case first perspective. So look at like areas that you're already spending a lot of time and resources on, and ask yourself if AI in its state today is able to actually help with that. And for us at Flint, like the obvious main use case of a school is teaching students, right? It's doing teaching and learning, right? And for us, it's like abundantly clear at this point that AI is really good at personalized learning and specifically offering students like academic intervention, extra tutoring, letting teachers better personalized learning for each of their students. And a lot of what we talk about is like, hey, if you're spending a lot of resources, obviously, on everything from materials for students to teacher salaries to extra interventions for students, there's now this technology that can help you get so much impact at like a fraction of a cost of many other solutions or other things you might want to otherwise try. So a lot of the focus, I think, has to be on use cases. And then in some areas that AI is not there to match the use case you're already putting time and energy into, but in some ways it will be. So I think for schools, the biggest piece of advice I'd have is like look for the use cases you're already investing in, because there's already some demand or need for that. And then just see, is this current state of the art AI platforms, AI tools, even ChatGPT, able to help me do this more efficiently or do more of it?
Mhm.
So my pitch would be teaching and learning. There's a lot there. But even to Evan's earlier point around like, finances or problems that teams of students might be facing, there might be individual use cases for each of those roles as well, that they could turn to AI to and kind of see what's out there.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Sohan said. And I think it's massively encouraging the degree to which AI has been able to help students, particularly students, to kind of like raise the floor as well as sort of like raise the ceiling. I do think, though, that we want to make sure this is kind of a tired analogy. Everyone's like, it's a cliche at this point, but the idea of sort of, strapping a rocket to a horse. Like we want to be really careful that we're not supercharging bad pedagogy. And so like making sure that we're assessing authentically, which means, giving effective feedback that allows students to use that feedback to iterate on what they're building, allowing them to reflect metacognitively about their own process, allowing them to apply their solutions to real world problems, having some agency in terms of, the mode and means through which they're demonstrating their learning. I mean, these are all like old pedagogical concepts from the mid 90s, a lot of them. We've known this is how you're supposed to assess learning, but it's just been much easier to do nothing but 5 paragraph essays and factual recall tests because That's sort of there's not a lot of friction there. In many cases, it's the way we were assessed when we were in school. So we're kind of repeating some of these patterns. And so I think missing the moment to say, well, why are kids cheating? It's because they don't find any meaning in what they're doing, right? And so like taking this as a moment also to rethink assessment, I think is a massive opportunity. And then on the operations side, I think there's a lot of conversation about, oh, can we do the same job we're doing with 10 times fewer people rather than can we do 10 times more with the same number of people, which is a better framing. And you have to start laying the foundation now for a kind of AI literacy among the staff and operations side so that when we get to a place where I can input a prompt and get an app out, and where like someone my mom's age can vibe code their way through like automating some of their solutions because they don't have to go to Zapier anymore. They can just like do it themselves really easily with conversationally, which is where we're getting to really quickly. They've got to be ready for that moment.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm combining what you just said, Evan, with what you said earlier, Sohan, about where AI is going in fields like math. Um, if you, I worry about how many schools might be saying, "Oh, our teachers can use AI to generate a calculus problem set that looks a whole lot like a calculus problem set looked 5, 10, 20 years ago," and then also feeling frustrated that how do we know if the kids are cheating on this problem set? When what you're suggesting, Evan, is rethink the whole assessment system and think about what how students can do a whole lot more than they used to do in a calculus class. That seems much more exciting, much less frustrating than just trying to police student work.
Yeah, I love the analogy Evan brought up of like strapping a rocket to a horse because like yeah, like some forms of assessment and teaching and learning are antiquated, maybe because of AI, but maybe they've already been antiquated and we've just been slow to adapt.
Mhm.
And we shouldn't be doing more of them. Like I think there is a lot of shiny object syndrome right now. Like kind of like what you mentioned, Rob, like, there's AI tools that I could use to go and make infinite math problems, right? But that might not actually be solving any problem. So it's really exciting to generate infinite math problems, but when you get down to it, is actually improving your main use case, which in those cases, maybe giving your students extra practice. So I think that's also important for schools to say like, all right, what again is the use case? I'm not just going to, start using a tool because it's exciting and it just looks cool because it might just be furthering, some pre-existing problem or giving me more of something that like isn't that impactful.
Yep. What if we shift to the glass half empty? So
Huh.
what are schools typically getting wrong when they first start using AI? And let's fold in a little bit of a hopeful vibe here. What could schools do to make sure that they're shifting from reactive experimentation to really ethical and strategic implementation of AI systems?
Sure. So, one thing I think makes sense for a lot of schools is to recognize that this is a really emotionally charged subject for teachers and for staff.
Mhm.
And while schools might feel like they don't have a ton of experience with AI or they don't feel confident in trying to solve this, they do have, in many cases, a lot of experience with change management problems. And I do think approaching AI in a school as an organizational development issue and a change management challenge gives schools a lot more agency to draw upon past experience to make change. And so concretely, that could look like, okay, well, like, what are the kind of narratives within the school that we're raising up to show everybody? So if you have really good examples of AI being used well, being used ethically, being used to really good purpose, like, are you raising up those narratives so that everyone can see it? And it's like you're not going to take that, staunchy English teacher who hates all this stuff. You're not going to make him do a 180, but you might be able to make him move like 10 degrees toward, oh, like I didn't know AI could do that. That actually is kind of interesting. Or, oh, that does seem to have made a positive impact on that person. Just to give a super quick example, we automated a process now over a year ago for an athletic director in North Carolina who every Friday had to spend 3 hours emailing all of the coaches that the school was going to play the next week, all of the refs. It was just pulling names and information from a spreadsheet into Google to do like Gmail, do emails. And we automated that process for her to populate her drafts folder with all those emails, pulling the information together. All she had to do was review it, be a human in the loop. And now, as a result, she can spend those 3 hours every Friday doing stuff that only a human being can do. And so when you raise up that narrative for the entire community, you can begin to shift how people are thinking. So I think approaching this as an organizational development issue and a change management issue gives schools a lot of agency to make change.
Yeah, what I say there is like this has happened less now than like initially when ChatGPT just first came out like, a couple of years ago. But I think some schools still today are going down the cheating detection path when it comes to like, okay, how do we prevent kids from using AI to write their essays? And that's dangerous for a few reasons. First of all, like in our view, the AI detection tools don't work. And they're not going to get better really at detecting AI writing. But the really insidious result of going down that path, though, is it really makes it challenging for students to be open about their level of AI use. And that can almost keep teachers in a bubble that may not otherwise want to explore what AI can do for them. So I was visiting the school back in March. I'm not going to say exactly which school, but we were having a roundtable with some of their students at lunch. And the administrator I was with told the students, like, hey, I want you to just be open and honest about your AI use, and nothing you say is going to be used to penalize you in any way. I'm not going to tell your teachers, etc. And he just asked them, like, yeah, how are you guys using AI? How are your friends using AI? And immediately, without any further like prompting, they were like, yeah, like a lot of us just use it to do our homework. And like people use it to cheat like all the time. And the administrator and I were kind of taken aback just by how open they were and how prevalent this problem seemed to be. And we're like, oh, like really? Like how often? They're like, yeah, like every day on every assignment. And that level of openness is obviously very scary. No school wants to admit that that's happening. And there's a reason why I'm not sharing the name of the school. Like obviously it's not something we're gonna like, advertise. But having that openness is really important because that administrator can now take that information and not go get those students in trouble, but instead actually have a more open conversation with their teachers about just the level of AI use that's happening with students. And teachers that might not otherwise be open to it will now be more open to something like assessment redesign, which is very, very difficult to do. But if you know how big of a problem misuse is with AI, you're going to be more likely to maybe use AI to change that problem or just to find a different approach altogether. So I think it's really open for schools just to be internally open and honest with each other. And a great source of that is just like creating environments where students feel comfortable sharing how they're using these tools because they are using them, especially the middle and upper school level. There's no denying that. So by not hearing how they're using it, you're really doing yourself, you're putting yourself on the back foot, I would say, as like an administrator team.
I'd love that both of you are getting at the sort of personal, emotional side of this topic. Um, couldn't agree more that if you're creating a culture where there's room to have discussion, um, that's in line with most of the schools that Mira and I are working with say that what they really want their students to be are critical thinkers, and hard to be a critical thinker if the culture is one of just policing. Yeah, so I'm glad you guys are reaching a little bit further than that. What about both of you? Your answers are making me think about what about the educator out there who says, I've heard enough about the energy use that comes along with AI, the bias that examples of bias that I've heard about being involved in training these systems. That's enough for me to just say, I want no part of this. What would your response be to someone who says, just ethically, I've heard enough that concerns me. I don't want any role. I don't want AI to play any role in our school.
Hmm. It's interesting. I'm torn on those ideas because on one level, yeah, everything all that is to some degree true. Like there is a really outsized environmental impacts in terms of like the amount of energy that these systems use, both in like their pre-training, like the amount of energy that goes into building GPUs. But I think especially as the models get smaller, and we're seeing now like how much bang you can get for your buck with a smaller model. My understanding is that like prompting something like ChatGPT and doing a Google search is becoming increasingly like similar in terms of like energy consumption. So I think that's actually getting better in a lot of ways. And then the bias piece is legitimate too. It's a real concern. But bias exists because it's reflecting back to us what's in its training data. So we're really just seeing a reflection of ourselves, of our internet, of our culture. And so it's not maybe exacerbating bias so much as it's just reflecting like the bias that already exists. So it's something you have to be cognizant of. It's part of the core competencies that students need to be aware of to use AI ethically. But those excuses sound like excuses a little bit to me. I would be curious what's going on under the surface for that teacher
Hmm.
because I think in as much as those are all legitimate things, my guess is that they are reverse engineering what is probably for them much more an instinctual, reflexive dislike of this stuff.
Hmm.
Yeah. My view there is like definitely agree with Evan there that like, the energy use of these models is going down very rapidly over time. Flint's only been in business for around 2 years, and we've seen around a 10x energy savings, let's say, in terms of like our how much compute we use to do the same amount of kind of AI inference at Flint. We're seeing like we're expecting 8 to 10x improvements every 2 years. So that's going to rapidly, bring the cost down to like, I think Sam Altman has this quote where he says he wants AI to be too cheap to meter, which is, I think like really optimistic, but we'll probably get there in a few years. The other piece I'd say is like, AI is energy usage. There's good and bad ways to use energy, right? I don't think people would say that we should not have electricity in schools because electricity in schools uses energy, right? But there's obviously other ways we waste and use energy in society that probably isn't giving us much. So the way I think about AI again in terms of energy usage is about the use cases. If you're using it for good, then as long as the ROI is there, it's worth it. If you're using it for not good things, then we probably shouldn't be doing it. So, like, if you just take an individual GPU, for example, that's used to train an AI model, you could use it to train an AI model that's been then being used to better diagnose patients or better teach students some topic. And that's like a really good use of technology and energy, in my view. You could also use a GPU to go to go mine some meme token, like some meme coin in cryptocurrency. And that's probably not as productive a use of that energy, right? So I would say it's all about how you use it. And then the other piece I would say to teachers is like, especially if you're working with like high school students, even if you individually choose to like opt out of using these tools, like you have some, you have something ethically against using AI, right? I think as an educator, you have a responsibility, especially teaching high school students, to prepare them for the future. And the level of disruption that's happening because of AI is not limited to education. Every single industry is having the same conversation we are right now about like what AI means for the legal profession, the medical profession, right? For like social services, like this is happening everywhere. So it's like really, really unlikely that your students are going to be in any corner of the world that's not impacted by this. So unless they're also making the same individual decision to opt out, you might be doing them a disservice by not preparing them at least somewhat for what's to come.
Hmm.
A lot of the questions I get from like, kind of high school senior level teachers is like, I'm teaching computer science to my students, like, what's happening in the industry? Like, is how out of date is what I'm teaching already becoming? And the answer is literally changing every few months. So I think it's like pretty dangerous to like keep students in the dark about that or expect that they'll kind of figure it out on their own. I think teachers ultimately the role boils down to preparing your students for the future. So this is just part of that.
I appreciate the nuance in your answers, and I feel like that's the sort of nuance we would want to hear when students are talking about this topic. So, thanks for modeling that. Um, we're gonna finish with a question about risks, but again, I'll try to frame it in a little bit of a positive way. So I'm curious what emerging risks you think schools might be underestimating right now, and on the positive side, what can leadership do to be more prepared for those risks?
Yeah. So I would be remiss if I didn't do my spiel on deepfake sexual abuse because it's been my main focus now for the better part of a year. And so I would just say two quick things on that issue. And just kind of speak to what I think are the institutional headwinds for schools that are maybe aware of this, but don't yet feel compelled to act or to change. The two most common things I hear on this issue are number one, we're aware of this, but we think it might be too niche. How often is this actually happening? We don't think it's happened at our school. We're not sure it is. And so it's a question of scope. And then the second one is, well, we've dealt with sexual abuse in the past, so we actually think we're good on this. We're prepared to handle this. And I'm sorry to say that on both those counts, schools are mistaken. And so on the first count, the question of scale, both Thorne and the Center for Democracy and Technology have run surveys on this. They both point to about the same number, which is that in the last year, 15% of high school students are aware of deepfake, non-consensual intimate image targeting a classmate just within the last year. The number of sextortion cases is doubling every year. That's according to NCMEC and the FBI, right? So I'll add too, this is according to Presidium, the youth to youth incident category for sexual abuse has also doubled in the last 10 years. The amount of payouts that schools are having to pay out to victims has gone up 200% in the same period. So schools are increasingly being held liable. And we now have federal legislation that makes this illegal in all 50 states, both real and non-consensual intimate imagery. So on so many levels, like this is a super underreported problem. Schools aren't taking seriously their obligation as mandatory reporters. They're being held liable. The impact on victims is severe. It's really similar to any other type of sexual abuse. And so schools have to recognize that this is much more common than they're going to be comfortable admitting to themselves. And then the second piece is, oh, because we've dealt with sexual abuse, we know how to deal with this. Whether it's the crisis communications piece, the evidence handling piece, the kind of supports that victims need to get these images down from social media, this is really distinct and requires its own training as part of a larger set of trainings, I would argue, for a variety of deepfake threats. And so schools just don't have the luxury of pretending like we're not heading into an era where the line between real and synthetic media is totally blurred. Like they have to get prepared for this today.
Thanks.
Um, I'll answer the question in kind of two parts. One is academic integrity, and the second is student outcomes in terms of like student performance. So on the academic integrity side, I think, for almost 3 years now, right? ChatGPT's been out for almost 3 years. Uh, Very quickly when it came out, people realized, oh, you can use this to write essays, right? And students might use this to cheat. And the obvious long-term answer from the beginning has been assessment redesign. But initially, that was really hard to pill to swallow, right? Because that's going to take a lot of time to do. Also, at the time, it really wasn't clear like how widely proliferated are like really good AI tools going to be. Like, are students really just going to be able to use them for free? Will how many of them will be using it? We're like almost 3 years in now. It's really clear that the access to AI tools is getting very cheap, very democratized. You can use like the latest AI models without even signing up for an account or like paying a single dollar, so kids can easily use it. And also, if you thought 3 years ago that it's going to take us years and years to do assessment redesign, the reality is now it's been 3 years, right? So I think schools need to seriously consider that. And like the 5 paragraph essay is probably like past its heyday, right? It's probably like going extinct very soon or should be extinct at your school, in some amount of time. So I think assessment redesign is like, the time for it really is now. There isn't, in our view, like a fantastic product that just does it all in one. It's something your school is going to figure out. Each of your teachers will individually have to figure out. But like the goal should be redesign, in my view. And the other piece is actually on student performance. I think like there are many schools now that are actively using AI to personalize learning for their students. And in some sense, if your school's not implementing personalized learning for students with AI, they may be falling behind to other schools and students that are. So, for example, if your school offers IB exams or AP exams, and you have students showing up to the AP Spanish exam, and they are essentially, in a sense, competing against other students that have had 100 hours of Spanish speaking practice with an AI model that's perfectly tuned to exactly what they struggled with the previous year in the pre-AP Spanish class. Your students that don't have access to that aren't using that, are going to be at a disadvantage. And it's going to take some more time for this to become clear because A, the models are getting so good so quickly that for a company like us, it's hard to measure impact because by the time we do a year-long measurement of like performance improvements, the AI has just changed so much in that year itself. And also, it's going to take time for exams to adjust, right? If some subset of students starts performing incredibly well on AP exams because they have all this extra personalized tutoring, it's going to take a couple years for the scale of the exams and the difficulty to therefore go up to kind of rebalance the curves that not everyone's getting a 5, for example. So I think it's going to take a bit more time to show, but it's going to become very clear to parents as well eventually that like schools that don't use AI for personalizing learning are maybe putting their kids at a disadvantage when it comes to just like how great they could be performing. So I think that one is a little bit further away. Maybe a year or two from now, we're going to be talking about like, why schools should adopt it for that use case. But yeah.
Thanks. Um, I mean, I'm processing everything that you guys have shared today, and some big takeaways for me are that absolutely AI not just will be disrupting education, but it already is. And so schools that are not accepting that reality are doing so at their own risk. that there are some big potential disruptions that we could be really excited about, and others that we should be very cautious about, and that the schools that are proactively thinking strategically and thinking about the future are going to be in a much better position to serve their students and to really meet the needs, the responsibilities that come along with being educators. Um, those are sort of the big ideas floating around my head right now. Wanted to give space for both of you to mention any closing thoughts before we finish here.
Yeah, I'll close just by saying how like insanely impressed I am by Sohan. Like Sohan and I talked maybe like 2 years ago or something, and it's so funny to hear you now because it's so clear to me you've just been on the ground having so many good conversations and seeing kind of like where the rubber meets the road, like what this actually looks like concretely in schools, what their concerns are, what's working and what's not. And so to hear what I remember of sort of Sohan's pitch for Flint roughly 2 years ago, and to hear how much like how it's so fully formed now, or at least it's made so much more progress in being this fully formed thing, and you know it's just really cool to see like how much progress has happened and just like how I don't know. I'm Sohan. Like I'm so impressed. But I mean, I hear great things about Flint all the time. We have Kyle Sumrow in common as a contact, and you know he's like one of your biggest evangelists. So I hear from him all the time about how great you guys are. But I just want to kind of give props to Sohan and to Flint for recognizing the opportunity in the independent school world, and then for being so deliberate and purposeful in how they've approached this world and the impact that they've had in helping students like all over the country. Just like what an enormous achievement. Like so impressed.
Really appreciate that, Evan. Yeah, no, I can't thank you enough. And I think like it is really only possible just because of like how open so many school leaders have been to working with us. When we entered the space a couple years ago, like we had no experience working with independent schools or schools, period. Like I grew up going to public schools, never been an educator myself. It's like a whole new world to me. So yeah, we're really grateful for the people that have like been open to like really working with us. Yeah, and to answer your question, Rob, I think for me, one thing I've been thinking about recently is like AI literacy. And part of the reason I'm thinking of it is going back to like that deep fake that like tricked me, realize like, all right, literacy is more than just like being tech aware, right? Like I feel like I'm pretty tech aware. There's still a lot of stuff that I don't know, a lot of stuff that can catch me off guard. I think that AI literacy has a lot of different flavors to it, and it's important for schools to equip their staff and also their students um, just about the breadth of different AI use cases. So obviously there's like the teaching and learning side, but a lot of the work that Evan's doing now is like a relatively new and underreported, under talked about area. So I think like it's basically impossible in my view for schools to say like, all right, we've done the checkbox for AI literacy because there's so many new stuff opening up and coming up all the time. So just being open to that, right? And just being aware of like what are the new risks, what are the new opportunities we should be considering. It's going to be like a permanent learning process. I think even the schools that were like really on top of their AI literacy a year ago doesn't really mean that they are nowadays. Like there's just been so much stuff that's constantly changing. So I would just say keep an open mind to just like how many different areas AI is impacting and how many different good and bad things are coming up like literally every month.
Nice. Thanks to both of you for being here today and for the work that you're doing. Obviously, trying to make sure that kids are safe and being well served and having all the exciting opportunities that they should have. So yeah, big thanks. Thanks to everybody for watching. Yeah, take care.